everyone. Let's be real for a second. Grocery shopping and food in general, it's a pretty big deal these days, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's all about how RFK Jr.'s vision for SNAP benefits could actually reshape the entire food industry. Like literally everything. From what we see on the shelves at the grocery store to how that food even gets there. I've been looking into that, and
hmm
the sheer scale of these potential changes is kind of mind-blowing. The ripple effects could touch every single part of the system, especially for those big companies that make all those packaged foods we're all used to.
It's true. And you know what's really fascinating to me is that RFK Jr.'s vision, it's not just about encouraging healthy eating. It's way more than that. He's talking about directly aligning SNAP benefits with public health goals.
Okay, so
And that could mean we'll see restrictions on like sugary drinks and all that processed stuff. And instead, there'd be incentives to buy fresh produce and just healthier options overall, like a complete 180.
So let's break this down a bit. First off, how would this actually affect people like in their everyday lives when they're using SNAP benefits to buy groceries?
Well, just imagine this. You're walking down the aisle at the store, and suddenly some of your usual go-to items, they're just not eligible for SNAP anymore.
Oh, wow.
That's a big adjustment, right? It could seriously change how people shop and probably even lead to some tough choices about what ends up in the cart.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Now let's flip the script and look at the companies that make these products. What kind of impact are we talking about for those big players like Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Conagra, Tyson, Kellogg's? The ones we see everywhere.
Oh, it could be massive. I mean, they could be staring down huge revenue losses if a big chunk of their customers can't buy their products anymore.
Right.
And that could force them to totally rethink their whole game, like reformulating recipes, coming up with entirely new branding strategies. I mean, imagine a world where that box of sugary cereal or that bag of chips, it looks totally different because they had to change it to meet the new SNAP guidelines.
Wow, that's kind of wild to think about. These companies are like giants. It's hard to picture them changing so drastically. But that brings up another question. Wouldn't this whole thing be a logistical nightmare? Like, actually getting all this fresh food to people is a lot more complicated than shipping boxes of stuff that can sit on a shelf for months. How do you see that playing out?
Oh, you're absolutely right. That is a huge challenge. It's like trying to turn a giant ship on a dime. The current system, the CPG supply chain, it's just not built for that kind of quick change.
Hmm.
We're talking major adjustments needed in warehousing, transportation, packaging, and even just how grocery stores use their shelf space.
Okay, so can you give me like a concrete example of what those adjustments might look like? What would be the biggest hurdles?
Sure, let's take warehousing, for example. If suddenly everyone's clamoring for fresh produce, you're going to need way more refrigerated warehouses and trucks that can handle all those perishable goods.
Right.
It's a totally different ballgame compared to just moving boxes of stuff that doesn't need to be kept cold.
That makes complete sense, especially when you consider that fresh produce has a much shorter shelf life. So it's not just about getting it to stores quickly, but also making sure it doesn't go bad before it even gets there. So how do you see logistics companies stepping up to handle this whole new landscape?
They'll have to adapt and get a lot more specialized. We're going to see a huge surge in demand for expertise in cold chain logistics, which is all about keeping those perishable goods at the right temperature from start to finish.
Right.
So that could mean investing in new technologies, training staff, and forming strategic partnerships. I mean, imagine companies fighting tooth and nail for refrigerated trucks and those specialized warehouses, driving up the costs for everyone.
Ooh, that's an interesting point. So if all this makes logistics more complicated and expensive, does that mean food prices could go up for everyone, not just people using SNAP?
It's definitely a real possibility. The cost of transporting, storing, and handling fresh produce, it's just way higher than for processed food. So yeah, we could see an increase in food prices across the board. And that brings up a bigger question. How will consumers react? Will they be willing to pay more to get those fresh, healthy options?
That is a great question for all of you listening. It's a complicated issue with a lot of potential consequences. So far, we've talked about the impact on consumers and those logistical challenges for the industry. But what about the companies themselves? How can they prepare for this potential earthquake?
Well, first and foremost, they need to understand that this isn't just about making small tweaks to their products. This is a potential complete transformation of how the entire food supply chain works.
Yeah.
Companies need to be proactive, not reactive. They need to make smart, long-term investments and figure out how to adapt their whole business models so they can thrive in a world where fresh, healthy food is the top priority.
So it sounds like this could actually be a huge opportunity for some companies to be innovative and position themselves as leaders in this new era of food.
Exactly. And it goes way beyond just tweaking existing products. Think about the potential for innovation in things like packaging, to keep produce fresher longer, to cut down on waste, and even developing entirely new categories of products that fit this shift toward healthier eating.
This is really starting to paint a picture of a whole new world of food. We've been focusing on the challenges so far, but let's shift gears and talk about potential solutions. What specific steps can companies take to navigate these changes effectively?
Well, one key area is investing in technology. We're talking data analytics to track consumer trends and predict demand, smart warehousing systems to optimize storage and minimize spoilage, and even exploring things like drone deliveries for that last mile of getting fresh produce to people's doorsteps.
Drone deliveries for groceries. That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Hmm.
But it also shows how this whole shift could lead to some really cool innovations. And it's not just about technology, right? Collaboration will be key too.
Absolutely. We need a level of coordination and communication that we haven't really seen before in the food industry. Companies will have to work hand in hand with retailers, distributors, and logistics providers to create a system that's seamless and efficient. If RFK Jr.'s vision for SNAP is successful in promoting healthier eating habits, we could potentially see a decrease in diet-related diseases like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease.
That would be a huge win, wouldn't it? Improving public health and reducing the burden of these chronic diseases would have benefits for everyone. And it raises an important question. How can we make sure this shift towards healthier eating actually benefits everyone, not just those who can already afford it?
Making sure SNAP benefits are enough to cover the cost of healthier choices.
So it's not just changing the food system, it's about changing the social and economic systems that contribute to food insecurity and health disparities. It's a much bigger conversation than just what's on our plates. We've got this really interesting case study to kind of illustrate these trends,
Uh-huh.
and that is Papa Murphy's Pizza.
Yeah, Papa Murphy's. Who would have thought? I mean, they're a pizza chain, but they're kind of in this weird middle ground.
Right, like how did they even qualify for SNAP benefits in the first place?
Well, it all boils down to how SNAP used to define eligible grocery items.
Okay.
The guidelines prevented people from using benefits on hot food or, ready-to-eat stuff.
Right, so you couldn't just walk into a restaurant and buy a meal.
Exactly. And Papa Murphy's, with their whole take-and-bake model, they kind of slipped through a loophole.
So because their pizzas are uncooked when you buy them.
They were technically considered a grocery item, not a restaurant meal.
It's all about that uncooked status, huh?
Pretty much, yeah. And it allowed them to reach a customer base that a lot of other fast food places just couldn't with SNAP.
So they had a real advantage.
Oh, yeah. They even marketed themselves as this affordable and convenient alternative to, like, traditional grocery store meal kits.
Interesting. But then things changed, didn't they?
Mm-hmm. The SNAP regulations got updated, and
Oh.
the definition of an eligible grocery item, it got tightened up.
Ah.
Now, anything that's considered ready to eat, so prepared with the intention of, being eaten right away, is ineligible.
Even if it needs some final cooking at home.
That's right. So even though you got to bake a Papa Murphy's pizza, it's now seen as too ready to eat for SNAP.
Wow. That's a pretty big shift.
Yeah, it is. And for Papa Murphy's, it's been a real game changer. They're facing a potential revenue decline because, well, they've lost a chunk of their customer base.
And I imagine for families who relied on Papa Murphy's as like, a budget-friendly dinner option.
It's tough, for sure.
Yeah. This whole situation really makes you think, too, about what happens to other companies making similar food products.
That's the thing. This isn't just about Papa Murphy's. This is a ripple effect across the entire consumer packaged goods industry. Like, think about companies that make meal kits or frozen foods.
Oh, right. So anything that's kind of in that semi-prepared category.
Exactly. They might have to completely rethink their packaging and labeling just to stay SNAP eligible.
But let's go back to RFK Jr.'s vision for a second. What do you think is the most interesting part of his approach?
You know what really stands out to me is his focus on using SNAP to not just influence individual choices, but the entire food industry. It's a bold move, and it can have a ripple effect throughout the whole system. If it's done right, it could totally change how we eat and think about food.
It's like he's trying to shift the whole system towards a healthier and more sustainable model. It's a big experiment, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out in the real world. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder. If RFK Jr.'s policies become reality, will this ultimately be a good thing for public health and the food industry as a whole?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. There are definitely potential benefits and risks to think about, and the final outcome will depend on a lot of different factors. But one thing's for sure, This is a conversation that's just getting started, and we all need to be part of it.